welcome. My name is Gunther Schmidtjens. I'm the Director of European, Russian, and Eurasian Studies in the Jackson School of International Studies here at University of Washington, UW we call it. Again, welcome to the conference if we are meeting for the first time. Those who were here last night know that this plenary session will not have a long introduction. The plenary session continues where we left off last night. After the keynote address by Professor Phillips Payson O'Brien on Europe's strategy in the Ukraine war, questions come up. Does Central Asia have a strategy? Does the European Union, which is different from Europe, have a strategy? And then, of course, Ukraine's strategy. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. We have three speakers today. First, I will just list them all, and then they will come in a series, speak in a series. Justyna Zając is Professor of Practice in European Security Studies and the Director of Polish Studies at Indiana University in Bloomington. Professor Nargis Kassenova is Senior Fellow and Director of the Program on Central Asia at the Davis Center for Russian and Eurasian Studies at Harvard University. And Professor Olena Lennon is Practitioner in Residence on National Security at the University of New Haven. Now, each of our speakers will speak for about 15 minutes, sharing their thoughts, observations, necessary updates, up to the minute updates, future directions for studying and understanding your area. Then we'll circle back with short follow-up responses, and then we'll open up for audience questions and discussions. We will begin, though, with a very open-ended question to our three plenary session presenters. As Russia's invasion of Ukraine enters its 13th year, what are the strategies of the European Union, of Central Asia, Ukraine, strategies towards long-term economic, political, and military security? And by the way, you're welcome to continue on a point that was raised yesterday, that countries of the European Union are 27 countries, not one. Central Asia is 5 countries, not one unit. You're welcome to bring those into play. Strategy of European Union, Central Asia, Ukraine.
Thank you so much, Guntis, and I'm very happy to see you still here since the morning. It's been a long day already, so I appreciate to see you. And just thank you for a very kind introduction, Guntis, and for really having me here and for invitation. Just a very one minor correction. I used to be the Director of Polish Studies at Indiana University. I was for 4 years, but my term ended last year, happily. So I'm not anymore, but I'm still at Indiana University, and I deal with Poland and with the European Union as well. So I have a little bit difficult task because I know that yesterday there was yesterday the excellent talk, the keynote speaker. So I will try not to repeat what was said, and I just really want to underline or highlight some issues, ask for maybe the discussion, and happy to answer the questions that you might have any, because the topic it's really broad and it's really complex. So I will, of course, not be able also to say everything. But I want to underline probably three things. And I will start from the very short answer, like if the European Union has the strategy. Shortly, no. Does not have the strategy, but I would also not blame so much the European Union, because we are living in a very, very unpredictable and I would say quite challenging time. So for the European Union, as for the other actors, I would say it's quite difficult to have now this set in stone strategy, because things changes from one day to another day if we think about the global politics. But definitely the EU has been trying elaborate the strategy, has been doing quite a lot of new things, especially in the last few years. And And I would say that whenever we think about the future, what the European Union needs is to look at the future and the security through the perspective of the future and not the past. What I mean by that, I will try to explain, and I want to underline three things. First is about the new phenomenon, not so new, but depends how we look at it, about the so-called hybrid warfare that European Union, the Europe, has been facing. Second, about the changes that's been happening between the US and the European Union. And I don't think that these are temporary changes, but they will have quite significant impact. And the third, that it's also the international order has been changing. So these three issues, I will go over a little bit of three of them. So first about the hybrid warfare. The European Union actually has been in the conflict with Russia since for 13 years. This is not open conflict, as in case of Ukraine. There are not military operations, but there are so-called hybrid warfare that has been going on, and there is the Russia hybrid attacks, quite a lot of them, on European countries. So what are the hybrid warfare? Hybrid warfare is relatively new concept that's been developing for about, let's say, 25 years. And it means that we need to look on the security and on the challenges on security really in a very broad term. And it means, in addition to the traditional military conflict that we know, also the type of instruments that are designed to harm and to damage, to make the damage, but these instruments are below the threshold of actual war fighting. So in other words, there are the damaging actions that are taken by the adversaries, but these are not military actions. So what kind of actions we are talking about? I'm pretty sure that when you follow the information from Europe, you've heard about the incidents of drones that flew into the airspace of the other countries like Poland or Lithuania, and then over the other countries. So this kind of violation of the airspace, we called, yes, this is the hybrid attack. I mean, it's not really the military attack because nothing happened, but it caused, of course, the quite damage. You know, the countries reacted, the society was very confused. What is going on? You know, are we in war? We are not in war. So this is the type of action that's been going on. Another one is GPS jamming or spoofing. Jamming is when the data is blocked in the GPS, and spoofing when there is the send false data to the GPS. And I don't know if you remember the last year, there was the incident when President of European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, she was flying to Bulgaria, and the GPS didn't work. So happily, you know, that the pilot, it's like old generation pilot maybe, they still had, you know, the maps that was printed happily because they took those maps and she landed safely, okay? But someone said, yeah, of course, it didn't just happen by chance. Someone made this, someone blocked the block data. Another, yeah, especially I see my colleagues from Poland, we've got, you know, arsons. I said, arson? One arson, another arson, or the fires here in Lithuania, in Poland, in Warsaw. It's like by chance? I said, no, this was someone who set up the fire. It just didn't happen by itself. Then we had the sabotage of railways. Yeah? And then, you know, it was caught before, so nothing, there was not like the victims, but generally people really started to be confused. They feel fear, anxiety, what's going on? Are we safe? Am I going to use the train? Because I don't know what may happen. So these are all kind of attacks that I'm not really sure if someone is behind of attacks, or maybe just the hooligans, or it's in purpose, who did it, but the damage has been done. Another one, we talk about, of course, the interference in elections. Since 2014, since the annexation of Crimea, if we look, there was, you remember the election in France when the Macron was and Marine Le Pen, and a lot of disinformation about Macron suddenly on the website, that, he's this puppet of the liberal elites, he's, I don't know, he raped someone, he had this horrible things, really to discredit him. Or maybe, he could lose the election and the Marine Le Pen would win, and Marine Le Pen was much more pro-Russian than Macron. Brexit, people voted for leaving the European Union, from the UK leaving the European Union, and it was, the margin of those who were for leaving was really small. And then after the referendum in 2016, it was proved that there was a lot of disinformation in social media. Was it just by chance? We know today that it's not by chance. So last example, it's weaponization of migrants. So this was going on and been going on the borders between Belarus and Poland and Belarus and Lithuania. Yeah, that is a typical hybrid attack. In other words, let's put the migrants on the border and let's make the problem for the societies, and for the institutions, and they need to deal with it. So what's really the purpose of this kind of hybrid attacks? Again, this is the new phenomena, so it's still under, the concept has been developing, and quite a lot of expertise these days. But generally, we say that with the hybrid warfare, the adversary use the the mix of various tools to harm integrity of the society, polarize people. Okay? So if we had the drones that entered to the Polish airspace, there is the discussion, who sent those drones? The government said, Russia. But the far-right party, Confederation, said, no, Ukraine. These are Ukrainians because they want to drag us into the war. And then the discussion starts, okay, who is responsible for that? And the whole discussion, begins. So the integrity of the society. Decision-making process and effectiveness of public institutions as well, because if you use the cyber attacks against the public institutions, you block data, you cannot communicate. Yeah, I mean that the public institutions are not effective, or not as effective as they could. So of course they cannot take the decision so effectively. And very much there is also the undermining the people trust towards the authorities and towards the other citizens. So, if you hear so many things and you see so many things around you, you start to think, who can I trust? Okay? And whether the government is saying, is it true or is not true? Can I trust in it or can I not trust in it? So we say, this is really like those hybrid attacks that are going on. So again, what's going on with these hybrid attacks is that everyone is targeted. I mean, we are all target, all like the people. So generally, these instruments are not not about army. It's not about troops. It's about civilians. It's about decision makers. Because again, the weaker states are, the weaker societies are, the stronger your adversary is. And this is in the case of Russia. The weaker European Union is, the weaker European Union countries are, the stronger Russia is. Yes. So this how it works, and this again what's been going. So looking into the future, I mean, the hybrid warfare is really something that the European Union has been and needs to focus. And the experts, the people who are in the fields, they understand it. They see it. They know that it needs to be focused on. I'm not sure how much politicians are aware of it, because they really use this polarization of the political tool. but they should stop using it because it's very harmful. But generally, people are aware of it. And then second issue is about the European Union and the US. And again, I don't want to talk much about this because I know that yesterday there's already been this discussion about it. But look, this was going on these days with the administration of Donald Trump. That's, of course, unprecedented. But I want to say that the changes between the relations between the EU and the US has been happened earlier. So in other words, the United States has been asked the European Union countries, the NATO countries, to spend more for the military, not with the Donald Trump administration. They started to ask about this in 2009. So, Donald Trump, because the style that he has, it was, says a lot and very loudly. And of course, the damage has been done unprecedentedly because you can do this differently. But it's been already earlier. The United States really, even if the administration changed in the United States and even with the goodwill, still the U.S. interests are going to be in the other part of the world. Asia, pivot to Asia was done during the Obama administration. Okay, then was the war in Ukraine, the Russia aggression. So the U.S. with Biden changed a little bit, shifted the attention. But Asia, Middle East, Latin America, I mean, the capabilities of the U.S. is also limited. So I would say that really the Europeans start to understand that they are on their own. I mean, they need to be on their own. And they need to think about this in the future that, yeah, we are on their own and we need to manage it. And the last point, don't want to go over the 15 minutes. Everyone who is really studying the global politics and then the international relations, the huge talk is about that we are living in the time of changes in the global order. What it means, okay, this global order that was established after the Second World War, 1945, and was established very much by the United States with the cooperation with the UK, plus some other countries, is starting to fall apart. What's changed and the main changes? First of all, there is the redistribution of power. We know it, the position of the West is declining in the global politics in the world, and the power of China, India, Russia, the other countries, non-Western countries, they rise. And of course, it's different if you act as the dominant player and if you act as one of many players. Okay, and the European Union, of course, need to see it. Second, also, especially United States, what we see, violated the norms, the principles of this order that actually was established by the United States, and we see it on the daily basis these days. Principle of sovereignty, principle of the international humanitarian law, yeah, violation of the international law very much. And also the structure, the institutions that were established after the Second World War, they are become weaker. United Nations, it needs to be reformed, especially Security Council, but also the other institutions, WTO, World Trade Organization, World Health Organization, become weaker, okay? Because the structure already, if the dominant player like the United States is not interested in, then those structures are not effective. So it's going to change, and again, the European Union needs to react and act, and to think, okay, how we are going now to have to act in these changes. So generally speaking, the coming years really will continue to be quite turbulent, and we are talking about this. The world is in turbulence these days, and will be in turbulence very likely in the upcoming future. It's much more fragmented. It's less predictable, is less based rule, is less certain. And then the European Union, the countries of the European Union, they just need to answer the basic questions. I mean, what the European Union is, what the European Union is going to be, what's the identity, who we are, who we want to be. And then that's the first really question, okay? Are we only the economic bloc, or we want to be also the political bloc and to cooperate in the other areas? So they've been the cooperation in the other areas and expansion, but there is the, the backlash from some political forces inside the countries, especially the far right parties. They don't want to expand the integration on the other areas than economic. What's the role of the EU on the global stage? Who is European Union going to work with? Who is the main partner? I think that the European Union has actually no choice, but needs to start to work closely and more closely with China, because this is what's going on. Europeans would love to be really still very close with the US, but again, it might not really happen, and people start to realize it, that, well, we need to open to China. But then if you open to China, China has got relations good with Russia. So how are we going to approach Russia? So this is like this domino effect, like we need to answer the basic questions, what we are going, who we want to be, what we want to do, with whom we want to do. One thing I would say it's really important, and that's my opinion and many other people, that whatever the Europeans think about the future, they need to think that they need to go together as the European Union. They cannot go separately as the 27 countries, because they are really too small and too weak, okay, in comparison to the other actors. Because with this globalized world, I mean, if you have like 2 million people, 5 million people, even 10 million, and even 80 million people like Germany, still you are much more smaller and much less powerful than India, than China, even than Russia, than the United States. And I mean, yeah, that's the, I'd say, even if you're not really want to be this with the integration, I'd say maybe it's the best path to proceed. So yeah, no strategy, but some thoughts to share. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and let me echo Justyna. Thank you so much for staying for the panel. I can imagine how tired everybody is. We'll try to entertain you. So, well, the question that Guntis asked us to address is whether our places, regions have a strategy. Does Central Asia have a strategy? And I can right away give you an easy answer. Central Asia does not have a strategy because it is a region of five states, and and yesterday we heard that the EU does not have a strategy, and you also echoed that, elaborated that on that, and in Central Asia we have even much less cohesion that what you have in the European Union. There is no Central Asian Union, although there was an attempt to create such a union in the early 1990s, right in the wake of the dissolution of the Soviet Union. But this attempt failed. There is no common foreign and security policies, but at the same time, it's not a complete no. Okay, and let me kind of try to argue the case. Since the early days of independence, Central Asian policymakers have had a very acute understanding of the country's vulnerabilities and the complexities of the geopolitical environment they found themselves in. And their policies and behavior have been aimed at survival and fostering sovereignty. Okay? And that continues to be the case. And I would say they have been quite prudent. They've been making mistakes domestically, but I think as far as foreign policy is concerned, I think our leaders have been quite prudent. They have been practicing strategic ambiguity. They have been hedging through diversifying partnerships. My country's government, the Kazakh government, defined its foreign policy as multi-vector foreign policy, and I remember people making fun of the term, and now this term is becoming more popular. And Finnish President Alexander Stubb used this term, right, in his foreign policy article. So and I would say overall the approach has worked for the region so far, right? Central Asia is conflict-free internally. The countries have resolved their border disputes with all their neighbors, including China, and we inherited a territorial dispute with China from the Soviet times, and they settled territorial disputes with each other in 2025. Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan signed the historic Hujan Treaty, so there are no more border disputes in the region. And I would say this approach is becoming more popular, the hedging approach. And I think what Justyna, you said, like, okay, now the EU needs to get closer to China. You know, you need to hedge your risks. It is becoming more popular. So I wouldn't say we pioneered the approach, but we're like ahead of the pack, right? Somewhere at the beginning of the pack. So now pretty much everybody's hedging, diversifying, and so on. And strategic ambiguity, again, is becoming a big thing, you know. So that's something we've been practicing. Okay, let me give a couple of examples of prudence. One important example is the kind of the border disputes, the conflict potential. At the very beginning, at the time of the dissolution of the Soviet Union and the creation of the Commonwealth of Independent States, Central Asian leaders adamantly insisted on the recognition of the existing borders, no matter how controversial. I've been studying the transcripts of meetings, and at every meeting they were insisting, okay, recognition of the existing borders. And there were some, there could have been contestation in the region. For example, 1956, some lands of the Kazakh SSR were transferred to the Uzbek SSR, right? The densely populated Fergana Valley, shared by 3 republics, has very, very complex borders and multiple enclaves, and it could have imploded. And there was actually in the 90s, there was an expectation that, you know, Fergana Valley will explode, implode, and so on. So they have been very, very careful with these issues, and they were careful with like non-interfering too much. For example, there was an interethnic there were interethnic clashes in southern Kyrgyzstan in 2010, and the president of Uzbekistan, Karimov, he said, okay, we are not interfering. They let in Uzbek refugees temporarily, then they sent them back. The policymakers in the region have been also very kind of prudently, carefully managing relations with Russia, and can also, if you want, we can go into that. Why is that? Why they have been so careful? I already mentioned that they were very aware of the vulnerabilities and the fact that the new leaders were from Soviet nomenclatura, right? They understood state making better. They understood the state of the economy, so they were more careful. Yeah, which is different from what we saw in some other republics, where new people, like some nationalists, came to power, and that created problems. Central Asian policymakers from the very beginning had a very clear understanding that they were largely on their own, left to their own wits. Something that, again, like now the EU is realizing. That situation was quite different from other parts of the former Soviet Union, where with the East European republics, being so close to Europe, right? And they had this prospect of vision of, breaking away from Russia and joining Europe. Central Asia didn't have that didn't have that prospect. It's in a very different neighborhood, and it was quite clear from the very beginning that nobody would, well, not nobody, but probably nobody would help it in times of trouble. They were not sure who would help them. Yesterday, the Budapest Memorandum was mentioned, right, when Kazakhstan gave up its nuclear arsenal. Well, sort of in return, the US, UK, Russia signed the Budapest Memorandum, in which they promised to help, but what they provided was security assurances. And I've done some research and interviewed diplomats, some policymakers who were involved in the process, and they said we were pushing for guarantees, we were asking Americans for guarantees, but Americans were very clear: we cannot give you guarantees. So we'll try to help you. These are assurances. These are not guarantees. But the memorandum proved to be even less useful than I think we expected in the 1990s. So, well, who could help us? The only kind of potential helper was and is, well, okay, actually now the situation is changing a bit, but it was Russia. So Russia was the official provider of security in the region, but at the same time it was a potential challenge, right, to the security of the region. In particular, Kazakhstan, was concerned because nationalists in Russia saw northern eastern regions of Kazakhstan as part of the historical, like Russia, and maybe you saw or you read Alexander Solzhenitsyn's article, How to Reconstruct Russia, in which he was saying these are actually Russian lands. If Kazakhs want to separate, let them take the southern regions where they can roam there. So this is Russia. We need to kind of recollect these lands, and that was quite concerning. The revival of Cossacks in Russia was also a concern because Cossacks played such an important role in the colonization of the region. But the Kazakh approach was to embrace Russia as much as possible and kind of try to negotiate, give something, receive something. And Nazarbayev got along with Yeltsin very, very nicely. So I think we should give him credit for that. So overall, the record of Russia as a security provider has been mixed. The help to bring to an end the Tajik civil war that lasted from 1992 to 1997, but at the same time they were party to the war. Yeah, they were supporting one side in the conflict. They did help to guard the Turkmen-Afghan border for some time. They are still on the 201st Motorized Rifle Division is still on helping Tajikistan to protect the Tajik-Afghan border, but at the same time, there are reports that officers, soldiers were involved in drug trafficking, so it was like very massive flows of drugs across the border. The Moscow refused to help when there were interethnic clashes in southern Kyrgyzstan in 2010, and they used the legalistic excuse. They said, "Oh, this is in interim government. It should be a fully legitimate government to ask us for help." The only time they interfered was in January 2022 in Kazakhstan. So the perception of what Russia can do and would maybe want to do changed over time. And well, primarily because of what happened in 2008, Russia-Georgia war, then 2014, the annexation of Crimea, and finally 2022, the full-fledged invasion of Ukraine. And that that created a lot of concern in the region, because what Russia did undermined the pillar of the post-Soviet political and security order, which is the recognition of the existing borders. So this principle was enshrined in the founding documents of the CIS, and it was in the bilateral treaties, and it was in other documents. So here you have Russia first, helping to create South Ossetia and Abkhazia, taking 20% of Georgian territory, then, grabbing Crimea directly, and then like trying to take the entire Ukraine. So Russia became kind of really a blunt revisionist imperialist power. And moreover, it looks like the international order, the global order, is falling apart. The order that Central Asian countries were born into in the 1990s. We see big countries, great powers, disregarding international law in a very blunt manner. We see the UN increasingly irrelevant for resolving big conflicts, and this is very scary for smaller countries, especially. Yeah, it is scary for the EU, but it's particularly scary for smaller countries. For bigger ones, like I talked to a Brazilian colleague, like Brazil doesn't seem to worry too much. They're okay. They are big. They are in a good neighborhood. For us, it's quite scary. So what do we do now? So what we've been seeing in Central Asia is more hedging, maintaining good relations with Russia, kind of trying to keep things as normal as possible, but at the same time diversifying security partnerships, economic partnerships, and political partnerships. And here the role of China has become even more important. China is a very, very important, obviously, neighbor for Central Asia. But with every crisis, we kind of lean more onto China, because it's it's a benevolent regional power, and it's much more predictable, right? It is endorsing our sovereignty, territorial integrity. It is helping. It has deep pockets. They provide a lot of assistance. Of course, there was a problem when there was this campaign in 2016, 2017. Yeah, like the major crackdown on Muslim minorities. Yeah, in Xinjiang, and not only, and these were not only Uyghurs but ethnic Kazakhs as well, and ethnic Kazakhs traditionally were the model minority in China. They were treated well, unlike Uyghurs. But in 2016, they were also sent into re-education camps. So they did create a problem, but I think kind of by now it's sort of behind. It doesn't affect the public opinion as much as it did at the time in 2016-17. There is also there are also efforts to build the middle corridor, and the middle corridor, it's the transport corridor that connects Central Asia with South Caucasus across the Caspian Sea and further to Europe, but also to the Gulf and to the Middle East. It was initiated in 2012, but it became more important since 2022, and there was a presentation about that yesterday. And Kazakhstan is putting kind of effort, a lot of effort to develop this corridor. Uzbekistan is also on board. And Turkmenistan is developing the port infrastructure. Although Turkmenistan has strange, anyways, approaches. So this middle corridor now it is needed both in Central Asia. The South Caucasus, countries of the South Caucasus also want to develop it. They feel they need it. The EU committed some funding for the development of the middle corridor. They give money to the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development to do a study that, then the World Bank also joined. So some money is coming from the EU. The US rhetorically supporting the middle corridor, but there hasn't been much material engagement. And China. Since 2022, China started supporting the middle corridor. Prior to 2022, they were saying, okay, we don't need, this is too difficult. This multimodal corridor that goes through many countries, and many countries that are not, that don't have the best systems, right? It's too difficult. The northern corridor is fine. The northern corridor is the one that goes through Russia, right? One route goes through Kazakhstan, then to Russia, and then to initially the initial plan was to connect to Ukraine, but then they changed and to reformatted it, so Belarus became the connector. So China since 2022 also got on board. Yeah, they're providing some funding and assistance and so on. So another thing that is important in this Western direction is the growing security cooperation between Central Asian states and Azerbaijan and Turkey. Yeah, so we see the emergence of some Turkic belt, right? Like connecting Central Asia, Azerbaijan and Turkey and Azerbaijan, they are allies, and they've had a lot of security cooperation. Now we are increasingly having military exercises, and there is a good amount of cooperation in the defense production. So Turkish drones are produced in Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan now, so the Kazakh, Kyrgyz, Uzbek officers are being trained in the Turkish military academy. So this is on the rise. The region became more important for the EU, and the EU became more important for the region. So that's why the EU is investing in the middle corridor. The EU is interested in the critical minerals of the region. So there is a critical minerals partnership now being developed. The US is also under the second Trump administration is particularly interested in critical minerals. That became the central issue on the cooperation agenda, and in general, we do see Central Asian leaders trying to develop, good personal relationship with President Trump. Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan presidents, they were invited to join the board of peace. Kazakh president joined the Abraham Accords, and all five visited the White House, and Kazakh and Uzbek presidents were also invited to join the G20 summit in Miami in December this year. So they're trying, they are trying to develop these relations and to offer some good deals. And I think Trump thinks that this is the region that has a lot of oil, a lot of gas, a lot of critical minerals. So it is of interest, He gets a bit confused who is who when he was meeting the Uzbek president on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly last year. He said, this is a great leader of the country of Uzbekistan. He has been a leader for 15 years or something. So he was very, very confused. And then he said, they have a lot of oil and they have a lot of money. Clearly, he had Kazakhstan Kazakhstan in mind, right? But nobody would correct him, right? But anyways, okay, there is something, there are riches, so let's have business. So they have money, so let's work with them. And there are these diversification efforts, but these efforts are becoming more difficult because of the overall destabilization, right? And we now also are trying to develop closer ties with the Gulf countries, for example, right? And the best way to get to the Gulf countries is via Iran. And Central Asian countries, unlike Americans, right, have had good relations with Iran. Like Iran is a constructive power in our region. It has been quite constructive on the issue of the delimitation of the Caspian Sea, because Iran is one of the littoral states. It has helped to negotiate the peace agreement in Tajikistan. It has been providing assistance, and there were plans to develop a transport corridor via Iran. There is the railway connecting Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, and Iran. And Kazakhstan and Iran agreed to have a dedicated terminal in the port near Bandar Abbas in the Persian Gulf. That would give us the connection to the Persian Gulf, like to the Gulf countries, right, to the GCC countries. And in December, the Iranian president visited Kazakhstan, right? So we could sign the deals, and so now this route is like. Right. Definitely, we need to postpone these plans. So there is this destabilization around that sort of hinders the plans of the countries of the region. Another important development, what Justyna, you said about the EU countries, that now in times of crisis you need kind of to stick together, right? We have there is a similar logic in Central Asia, and we are trying to cooperate more and coordinate. That started prior to 2022, and that's linked to the change of leadership in Uzbekistan. When Islam Karimov died, Shavkat Mirziyoyev became the president, and Mirziyoyev changed Uzbekistan's foreign policy considerably. He prioritized developing good relations, friendly relations with the neighbors. They normalized relations with Tajikistan, with Kyrgyzstan. The relations improved, and at the General Assembly, he said, "Okay, we need to work closer together in Central Asia." So since 2018, we started having annual consultative meetings of the 5 heads of Central Asian states. Now they're working on setting up the secretariat, and there are discussions of like developing something bigger, institutionalizing this cooperation. And ASEAN is the kind of the role model, right? That people refer to, but also kind of Nordic cooperation is another inspiring example. So we are working together, and we are increasingly the C5, the so-called C5+1 format is becoming popular. C5+1 format is like when all 5 Central Asian either presidents or foreign ministers or other ministers, right? They meet their counterpart. Well, the German chancellor or Japanese prime minister or Indian prime minister. So it's becoming quite popular. An interesting development is the emergence of C6. Azerbaijan leader Ilham Aliyev, he has been participating in the consultative meetings. And last year, Azerbaijan said we want to join. So we might have like C6, which is an interesting format. And one more thing, kind of, I think, an interesting development is that Kazakhstan, since 2024, has started positioning itself as a middle power that is eager to contribute to kind of international peace and security. Yes, my time is up. But if you're interested, I just published a paper on Kazakhstan as an aspiring middle power. It's a Harvard Belfer Center project on middle powers, and there are 13 cases, 13 countries that are hedging. Okay, the countries that are in between, U.S. And China, and I'm writing on I wrote the Kazakhstan case. I want to talk a little bit about hybrid warfare, but I'll talk about it maybe later. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. I'm here to mix it up a bit and show you some pictures and slides, because I understand that you've been very good listeners, so you don't have to listen to me, but you can read my slides. I also find slides helpful in a follow-up test. That's what my students tell me. Okay. Right. Well, my name is Olena Lennon, and a few disclaimers. First of all, I'm originally from Eastern Ukraine. I teach U.S. foreign policy and national security and Russia-Ukraine war at the University of New Haven, or UNH. UNH is also University of New Hampshire, so I'm at the right UNH. Also, I want to warn those of you, given the appreciation that this city has for all things rock music, and I'm a big fan of a lot of the bands that hail from Seattle. So those of you who, perhaps when you saw my name, who came here to expect me to do some cover songs of my Uncle John, I hate to disappoint you. I am going to be talking about Ukrainian strategy. So, if survival can be called a strategy, then yes, Ukraine has a strategy. Its strategy is to survive. It has no choice. But I'm just going to walk you through some of my ideas as far as where I see Ukrainian strategy. But first of all, I want to applaud my co-panelists here on covering a lot of ground and really situating this conversation in a global context, because the Russia-Ukraine war is a global war. It's a global event, and it has created irreversible change in global order. And I wanted to respond to, as we were encouraged to respond to Phil O'Brien's wonderful keynote speaker speech yesterday. So I challenge accepted. So as much as I appreciate it and I agree with a lot of what Phil said about European strategic autonomy and the U.S. pivoting toward Asia, or kind of reprioritizing its security differently. As a naturalized citizen, I'm not only a believer in the U.S. form in American goodwill, but also as somebody who teaches U.S. foreign policy. I have to say that I do think that the institutional continuity in the U.S. is much more robust than meets the eye. I think the institutional strength in the United States is such that leadership fluctuations, leadership style fluctuations will come and go. But there are certain structural interests in the U.S.-EU relationship and in the European defense that I think will outlast Trump's administration and will outlast other administrations. So I do believe in the continuity of American foreign policy. I think that the one persistent or one consistent aspect of American foreign policy is that Americans will always try every bad idea, and in the end they'll do the right thing. And we can trust that. I think it will happen again, that we will, make a lot of mistakes, but then we'll come around and do the right thing. So I do think that the U.S. will re-engage in the European security eventually. But anyway, so just to bring you up to speed on where we're at, to situate my remarks in a battlefield update, not because it's a territorial conquest necessarily, and I do think that sometimes territorial discussions, can be misleading, but nonetheless. So at this point, Russia controls about 20% of Ukrainian territory. But I do want to emphasize that most of that territory the Russians took before. In the initial phases of the war, in the first invasion of 2014 through 2017 approximately. So it doesn't include the currently occupied or the self-proclaimed republics. And that is to say that the Russian advances have slowed down, that the Ukrainians have put up a pretty robust defense, and they're holding the line. And the Russians are actually the Ukrainians liberated a lot of territories in the past few months. So it's any further advances are costing Russia a lot of resources and a lot of money. So things are not necessarily looking up for them, and the Ukrainians have been holding the line. So the past few months have been marked by Russia's desperate attempts to exhaust the Ukrainian resources, exhaust Ukrainian civilians, and fundamentally deny Ukraine to be an opportunity to be viable, or resources to be a viable state. And I think it's really important to do the conversation of what is Ukraine's strategy, because Ukrainians have been slowly but effectively closing the capabilities gap. Now that Ukraine has developed its own capabilities to conduct deep strikes into the Russian territory and target Russian energy infrastructures, particularly its oil infrastructure, deny Russia the revenue to continue to prosecute this military campaign. So with Ukraine now offsetting that initial disadvantage more effectively, the Russians are bringing the pain onto the civilians because they're suffering, they're failing to achieve political objectives with conventional forces. So to increase the pain to exhaust Ukrainians and to execute this maximum pressure campaign, they're bringing the war to Ukrainian cities. That's a sign of despair. That's a sign of Russia being increasingly frustrated and Putin being increasingly frustrated. And the reason we're seeing these levels of frustration are precisely because we are not the talks about negotiations or peace deals are premature and perhaps a bit misleading and distracting, because the moment is not pregnant, so to speak. We're not the Russia and Ukraine are not quite. It's not a stalemate. They're not quite. The time for negotiations has not come, as negotiating positions are still being calibrated on the battlefield. And there are two fundamental factors or ideas that prevent negotiations from taking place at the moment. Both Russia and Ukraine believe in two things: that victory is possible and defeat is unacceptable. So good luck to all of us who try to negotiate or bring the two parties to some type of a peace agreement. Now, and that's also important as far as what Ukraine's strategy is, and I'll offer some of my remarks, is that Ukraine currently, as much as it has a long-term plan to survive as an independent state, in the short term, and I think it's really important to differentiate short, medium, and long-term strategy here when we talk about strategy, is precisely because in the short term, Ukraine's strategy and Ukraine's goal is to bring the West, specifically the United States, to agree to negotiating a ceasefire. Not a peace deal, not a peace agreement, but a ceasefire. That is something that the U.S. got behind initially, but then after the meeting in Alaska, Trump walked out of that meeting, and since then, he has been repeating the narrative that we don't need a ceasefire, we can just work on the peace deal, and that has fundamentally deviated or got off the track that Ukraine was on pushing for a ceasefire as an essential first step. And the reason it's important is because Russia has been pushing the U.S. to force Ukraine to work on a long-term resolution. But the problem is that in Russia's view, the long-term resolution means that the underlying causes of the war are Ukraine's existence. So Ukraine cannot accept those are the terms of surrender. So I'm gonna get into my teacher mode here and quickly go over some definitional terms and remind people in terms of strategy, that at the end of the day, strategy is just a plan of action, right? So it's a plan of action in response to a threat that Ukraine is facing. And as we know, threat has two components: capabilities and intent. So time and again, Western leaders, as they rotate, American, European leaders, as they rotate, focus on every new leader who comes to power in the US and in Europe is compelled to change Putin's mind. Putin has outlived 6 American administrations. Now, he's been in power for 22 years. And every new administration comes to power and says, well, the previous guys really, messed this up, and they made a lot. We're gonna solve this problem, and they begin by solving the problem by finding new ways to change the intent. Putin's mind has been made up. He's not going to change his intent. The intent is the same: to deny Ukraine resources to be a viable state, so that Ukraine could fold back into the Russian orbit. The only thing that we can influence is capabilities. So if we start focusing on how can we deny Russia resources and revenue to prosecute this genocidal campaign, instead of changing its intent, because that's a waste of time and more people die as a result. So that's what Ukraine is focusing on in the long term, on using every single possible way of reducing Russia's ability to continue prosecuting this war, this military campaign at this pace, with all means possible. And these means involve, diplomacy, economy, the battlefield, and it's a war of endurance. It's a war of attrition in which he who endures longer survives. So how does Ukraine plan to endure? So there's, I'm gonna actually, in the interest of time, skip the effect of the escalation in the Middle East for now and go straight to Ukrainian strategy. So Ukrainian long-term strategy and short-term strategy really is to, in some ways, quite straightforward. Ukraine needs to survive, and that means Ukraine's plan is to outlast, outsuffer, outmaneuver, and outadapt the current Russian regime. And I say the current Russian regime because I too hope that future Russian leadership administrations will have a different foreign policy, although I'm pessimistic about that. But that's a conversation for another time. So currently, Ukraine's endurance is a component of its ability to endure on the battlefield, endure on the world stage, economically, in terms of energy, and of course, socially. So what does it all mean in practical terms? Militarily, Ukraine's currently is yes, it is outgunned and outmanned, but it's actually, again, thanks to actually, and I can't even believe I'm going to give Elon Musk credit for this, but thanks to Elon Musk denying Russia access to Starlink internet access, that actually translated into real battlefield advantages for Ukrainians, and it slowed down Russian military. Strike Russian energy infrastructure, and wear down Russian defenses so that the war becomes prohibitively costly. Again, focusing on denying, just the fact that Putin has maximalist crazy ideas doesn't mean that those crazy ideas should be allowed to be executed. We can't change everybody's minds, but we can deny them instruments to execute those ideas. Diplomatically, the plan is to maintain control of the narrative. The Ukrainians have been, particularly the Zelensky administration, has perfected the art of diplomacy in terms of strategic communication, and they continue doing so. One thing about Ukraine that I think is quite remarkable is that, and my colleagues here, and I know that when we talk about European strategy or Central Asian strategy, the first thing that needs to be highlighted is that it's not monolithic, right? In Ukraine, amazingly, national unity maintains national unity despite corruption scandals and disagreements on how to actually, operational disagreements, how to prosecute the war. There's a lot of scandals related to mobilization, how mobilization has been conducted. But nonetheless, the national unity is strong, and there is viable opposition in Ukraine. Zelensky is not king. Yes, he monopolized power in many ways, but due to martial law. But Ukrainian opposition is very nuanced. Ukrainian opposition is framed around or centered around this idea of how exactly to approach military defense procurement or prosecute, its defensive and offensive operations campaigns. But it's not about, do we sit down with the, do we surrender territory, do we not surrender territory? As far as not making territorial concessions and not surrendering territory, there is no opposition on that particular aspect. So in that way, there is one coherent strategy, because Ukraine's opposition is not about terms of surrender. Ukraine's opposition to Zelensky domestically is about nuances of defending its territory. On the energy front, Ukraine actually has adapted, survived the so-called Cold War that started in November, where the Russians leveraged freezing temperatures to maximize pressure on Ukrainian civilians and were bombing energy facilities at a time when temperatures were particularly low. Now, that had an expiration date. Now that temperatures are warmer, the strikes obviously are still brutal, but they don't have the effect that the Russians intended them to have. And then more remarkably, Ukraine really has positioned itself to be the leader in defense innovation and defense adaptation, and has recently signed even more joint production agreements. The idea here is to distribute defense production networks to where they're less vulnerable to Russian attacks, invite foreign direct investment into defense industry, leverage its combat-tested capabilities and innovation. And one of the things that really makes Ukrainian defense industry stand out is assured battlefield feedback loops. Most units on the ground there will literally be just a phone call away from engineers in Lviv and Kiev who are calibrating this capability. So the feedback is immediate. And these new weapons are tested on the battlefield, the same day. And then feedback is incorporated. So the iteration cycle in Ukraine is about 4 to 6 weeks before newly developed capabilities then become outdated, because the Russians adapt too. So it's a constant adaptation game. In most Western defense industries, iteration cycle is about 3 years. From the time it's developed in the lab, tested, and then scaled up. So Ukraine offers some really real opportunities for innovation there. And lastly, I'll end on this point in terms of endurance and strategy to endure and to outlast and outsuffer the current regime. The public opinion is still strong. It has declined slightly. But if you look at the time series here from May 2022 to January of 2026, and these longitudinal opinion polls were conducted by Kyiv International Institute of Sociology, which I'm sure many of you know, that the blue part of the bar there represents people, the percentage of people who said that, for how long are you ready to endure the war? And these, the percentages in blue indicated that as long as necessary, if you can read the font there. So the percentage dropped a little bit, but not significantly enough. Still, the majority of Ukrainians continue to report that despite all the pain, they will endure the war. They are ready to endure the war as long as necessary because they don't have a choice. And there's a lot of Ukrainians here in the room, and I am in contact with a lot of my friends and colleagues and family in Ukraine too. And I always find it interesting that when, as remarkable as Ukrainian resilience and courage is, a lot of Ukrainians really frame it as, how do you choose to die? Do you die in occupation or do you die by fighting? And a lot of people, choose the latter. So it's not necessarily a choice that a lot of Ukrainians can make. And I'll lastly, and I will skip some of these slides, but I do want to you can disregard, and now I'm realizing that when you tell people to disregard something, that's exactly what they're reading right now. So disregard all the points. I want to end on the bottom line. Ukraine's win is undoubtedly very expensive for Europe, very expensive for America. But Russia's win is going to be a lot more expensive. So, place your bets accordingly. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to the conversation.